Hey guys, Nick here, coming at you with a late Christmas and early New Year's video, and filming in scenic my car for hopefully just this video, likely not a slew of videos, but my filming regular recording location is not super convenient to record at right now. So you guys get the glad, happy pleasure of being placed precariously and jauntily on top of my steering wheel, kind of, sort of. I go in for an early opening shift tomorrow, and so as I sort of ponder this 5 p.m. onwards, chilly winter darkness, my mind, of course, is on the holidays that have just passed us by. Christmas, which was a really nice little small family affair in my world, and the New Year, which I'm really excited for. I've got several things coming to fruition in the New Year, many of which I've worked really hard for a while to achieve, and so I'm looking forward to the New Year. Looking forward to of course, spring and fall the most, season and temperature and weather-wise. And, okay, let's go in sequence, of holiday. Christmas. I wonder what most people enjoy about Christmas. I feel like it's not typically, I don't know, I feel like America doesn't have that many super cool holidays. I don't feel like most Americans enjoy, well, that's probably not fair to say. I will say I feel like a lot of Americans enjoy American holidays for different reasons than we would give you, or different reasons than the holiday is like traditionally supposed to be enjoyed, I suppose, or like the founding principle of it. Although I feel like we're disingenuous about what a lot of those reasons for enjoyment and those founding principles really are. For one thing, we're statistically essentially a Christian nation. Of course, that has statistically gone down over time, although majority, I think, we're still a Christian nation, at least self-identified. But I feel like a lot of that is tacit. I don't feel like I feel like you won't find most Christian Americans putting a huge focus on, God, here's a little bit of my ignorance shining through, but the specific religious aspects of the holidays, like Christmas as Jesus's birthday or whatever, or Easter as Resurrection Day or whatever. I know that there's some sort of Jesus connotation with each one. Of course, Christmas, Santa and Kris Kringle and Saint Nick are analogous to Jesus, and I feel like there's more of a heavy emphasis on that. But there's and then there's also sort of an issue with American education and the average ability of an American and willingness to express themselves and to think about these things and really consider the philosophy behind them and actually deeply explore why we do the things we do. I feel like there's a dishonesty there, and also likely a widespread shallowness about the way we actually think about those things. But there does seem to be what we tell other people and what we tell ourselves, and what the holiday is rooted in, and then the secondary, what we actually focus on. With Christmas, it's Santa Claus, which is not really Jesus in any sense. Not that I have a problem with that, but, the holiday roots in its Christian importance. And, we fucking, as a consequence, I think, also of our highly evolved forms of media that we love to consume now. We just focus on this cartoonish character of Santa Claus, and especially the way that we gear children to engage with the holiday, and be excited for it. It's about this cartoonish character. I really don't feel like most kids are taught too much to focus on the religious connotations, even if they're taught about them, maybe. Perhaps I'm wrong. And, so I do feel like there is a very real reality of people understanding that because of their Christian faith, there's some obligatory religious significance and connotation to these holidays. And then there's what they actually put the emphasis on, and it's usually not a super strong religious focus, even for the average Christian, from what I've observed in the areas that I grew up in. It, of course, capitalism and increasingly dumbed down media, there's many factors with everybody in the modern age, but America certainly, that cause us just to focus on commercialism and consumerism. And that's one part of what I'm talking about. But I think plenty of Christians ignore what, if you're going by the Bible and traditional Christian teachings and conventions, is supposed to be the religious overtones of the holidays, let alone the undertones. And again, not like I have an issue with that, but there are probably plenty of people, if anyone listening, my demographics breakdown on YouTube shows that I have a decent amount of non-US listeners, so maybe that's some helpful context for you when you think about and wonder about American holidays and what they mean to us. I do feel like there's what we're taught, what we internalize, what we tell other people, and then the reality of it. All slightly different things layered on top of each other, but each is a little bit different. So what do I enjoy about Christmas? I enjoy my mom's homemade cinnamon rolls, and I enjoy family time. I enjoy not having to work. I enjoy holiday pay. What else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't enjoy grossly overspending money unnecessarily at any time of the year, so I certainly don't do it for Christmas. Although, I mean, I do buy gifts, and I try to make them, typically, I don't know. It's an income thing, I suppose, but it's really a mindset thing. I never go super big and super bombastic, typically anyways, but it's also sort of my family tradition. Now, if two or more of us want to go part in on a more bombastic gift for one of the other ones, we'll do it and let that person know, take equal parts credit when we give that person the gift. But I guess in my family, as adults anyways, there's not this level of exorbitant spending. We have sort of an unspoken rule, and also just really it has been spoken plenty of times in my family, that there's no expectation or pressure or need to spend more than you're comfortable with, and certainly more than you're able to. We don't expect that of each other, which I feel like, from what I've observed with other people, is likely a difference. I do see a lot of adults who still keep up that energy. Now, I think that a lot of households with children, just because of the, ooh, give me, I want this, I need that nature of children, and the excitement of the holiday and of getting what you want, and a good parent's desire to give their kid a little bit of that at a special time of the year, especially if that kid can't or doesn't get that throughout most of the rest of the year. That rampant consumerism is really baked in. It's exciting for kids, and it's also like pretty hard to avoid when you have children. But I do see plenty of adult families still like feeling the pressure, and to the point where they will feel, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? They will feel like they're disappointing their family. They'll feel like, they haven't done what they're supposed to for Christmas. If they haven't, you know, gotten someone a gaming console and something else, or at least something as bombastic as a gaming console, I feel like those expectations are still there, even though such things are so much less affordable than they ever used to be. And I know that's not exactly a novel suggestion in our current economy, but it's not a novel suggestion ever. People are always talking about inflation and the poor state of the economy in America because people are always getting fucking squeezed. But I do remember a time in the early 2000s where well, and of course, this is coming from a certain privileged purview, you would probably say, of my upbringing. But I definitely remember a time where console gift giving and gifts like that, you know, they might be the thing to do, but I also don't think that they were, I don't think that prices were nearly as inflated back then. Although I could be completely wrong and out of touch and misguided with that thought, but it didn't seem to always be such a big stretch to be able to do that. You know, at least for like a set of kids, a parent, you know, parents that fell into any sort of middle class used to probably be able to afford that kind of a thing without stretching the budget unthinkably. At least one console, one Christmas every couple of years, it was doable, you know. But what can I say? Things change. I simply don't generally participate in gross overspending, and I'm frugal with my spending, and so it's just not a part of the holiday that I participate in a way that makes a super noticeable difference to my budget and my bottom line. But I certainly go out for thoughtful gifts that I think people will enjoy. So that's how I celebrate Christmas. The New Year I love. It's definitely the best of what we have to offer for holidays here. I'd love to know from you guys. I probably should have led the top of the video with this question, but I'm curious to know what holidays all of you guys enjoy the most, especially from my non-American viewers at home. What your favorite holidays are and why. New Year's is a fantastic one because it's just a celebration of the passage of time, and it's got a wistfulness to it looking backwards. It's got a hopefulness looking forwards. You know, and even if, whatever, statistically speaking, New Year's resolutions don't pan out, I think it's great for people to be thinking about what they want to do with their lives and what improvements they can make. I think far too little of that happens in this country, to be blatant about it. But this is sort of one of the more main topics and ideas that I had for this video is another moment where I hope to have a message of hope for a lot of people who might be listening, of any age, but certainly in my comparable age group, late 20s, or even younger than that. I hope that my message of hopefulness can spread to you guys a little bit. My younger 20s and mid 20s consisted of things like leaving my home state to go volunteer for the government for not all that much money. When things even out, it wasn't an experience that was not worthwhile. In large part to the value of travel and those experiences that I got out of it. Just different things. Moving out to a super remote area that was isolated for several years before coming back to my home state. Things like this. And, learning Spanish as a second language, or, picking it up semi-casually as a necessity of working in a heavily Hispanic and Spanish-speaking area. Things like this, getting out there, being out in the world, stretching myself a little bit, out of my comfort zone, mentally, emotionally, and most certainly, at times, financially. Never more than I could handle, but there were times when I accrued debt that I've had to work through and have learned from. But these are the things that I spent the prior part of my 20s doing. And there are always going to be times in life where we get to a point where we may not know or remember really why we ended up where we are. We may sort of lose the plot on what we thought we were doing, or why we thought we were doing what we thought we were doing when we got to where we are. Or perhaps we know that part of things, but we don't know how it ended up how it is, and we're not sure where we're going with it. I mean, that's got to be the most relatable aspect of being in your 20s. I don't care how much money you make, how well off you are, or what part of the country, or what country really you're even in. I think that's just a necessary part of being an adult, a grown adult, but a young one. Not young adult in the sense of being a minor, but 18 up. And some people always feel that way. And there will always be an amount of that in people's lives, I feel. But that's like the bread and butter of being in your 20s. So what about it? With some concerted effort and a refocusing of my priorities and what's important to me, and really just I feel like at some point something just clicked into place for me where I really started specializing in, exercising my abilities of planning into the future. Not just what is next month going to look like, but next year. What about the next 5 even? And then starting to specialize in that when I could prove to myself that I was successfully, starting to line things up in that way, think about them in that way, and execute on things in my life in a way that made sense and was beneficial for a longer timeline. And there's, of course, I don't have a specific and highly accurate source or statistic on this, but it's understood scientifically and peddled around as sort of a common scientific finding that people like to talk about, that, it's the 25 to 26 year old age range, when supposedly, I'm not going to claim this as absolute fact, but, a physiological fact that I think most people know, that age is when the prefrontal cortex, as people call it, develops. Basically, that's supposed to be the common age where people are, polishing up and have fully developed the tendency and part of the brain that starts to think in that way. That was certainly right around age 26, when my brain decided to start doing that in overdrive, even age 25 maybe. And it can be scary if you realize you haven't quite done that up until that point, but also it can be super beneficial because a lot of these disparate parts, or what I used to think of as disparate parts of my life and of ways that I had lived and what I had achieved in my earlier 20s, had come into focus because I realized I did not. There were moments, when I was much younger, I'd say 18, there had been a span of several months where I felt depressed and didn't work much for a period of maybe 3 to 4 months when I was like 18, freshly doing the whole thing. And I at the time didn't have really any large amount of bills or rent or anything that needed to be done. At any rate, the mental train just sort of derailed there for a minute. But the disparate parts of my earlier life, they sort of came into a certain focus at a certain point because, aside from pretty much only that period of my adult life, I've worked hard and I've done my best. I've certainly done very well and always tried to do my best. I've fumbled here and fumbled there and made certain mistakes, but at the end of the day, I've tried hard. I've pushed myself out of my comfort zone. And whenever I've gotten stuck into a rut, I've always found my way out. I've always made it important not to stagnate or to feel like I'm stagnating, but to push myself out into doing something and doing something different and trying to learn something. And if you have just maintained that level of energy and effort of some way and resilience in understanding that those aspects of your behavior and your motivation as an adult are important, you will get to the point where you can start to tie those things together into mounting fruitful changes later down the line. I realize I'm not being super specific in all of this, but I've absolutely come to the point where next year I will be achieving, things I've wanted to for a little while, financially, in terms of mental well-being, emotional well-being, physical well-being, that have drawn on career-wise, employment, that draw on almost everything I've done as an adult life, that took ambition, that took some guts to do, to force myself out of my comfort zone, to go and do. Almost every element of weirdness and of off-the-wall idea and simply, but also mundaneness. Sticking to a 9-to-5 job for years when, maybe I can go find something that is off the wall. What I'm saying is almost everything I've done as an adult that has been productive has, slowly and gradually come to a place where it ties into a bigger picture and propels me forward. And I see that where at times through lower self-confidence and lower self-esteem and even periods of depression, it was easy and tempting and almost inevitable at the time for me to feel like I've ended up in this way that's pretty bad off, and I didn't know what I was doing when I got into this. I don't know what I'm doing now, and I don't know what I'm going to do. You don't always have to, though. You don't always have to exactly know those things. Later on, you sort of start to work with what you've got, and what you've done provides you with what you have at a certain point. At least that's the way that I think of it. And if that doesn't make sense, that's just too goddamn bad, because I explained it as best as I can. And I get the feeling you guys know what I mean, but, you know, basically trying works out a lot of the time if you're able to, you know, not burn bridges willy-nilly out of embarrassment, out of pridefulness, out of shame. And it's, you know, perfectly good to embrace those feelings. Shame, you know, and own them and acknowledge them. Shame, pridefulness, and hurt pride also, you know, all of these things within a reasonable metric where you're acknowledging your feelings, you're holding them, and then you're trying to make something useful out of them. You know, so I want to hopefully impart that message of hopefulness to people who haven't gotten to that stage yet. I really think if you're doing something, you know, if you're doing something substantial or hard or with determinazione, you know, even if it's grueling, even if it's mundane, even if it's scary, it's new, it's uncertain, it's bold, it's daring. You know, I don't tell people, I don't recommend, and I won't recommend that you cling to a sinking ship no matter what, but I do think you'll get to a point in your life where your level of cognition for the future and your level of future planning will help you start to spin things into a nice patchwork fabric where you might have thought there were disparate elements. You might have thought you didn't really know what you were doing, and maybe you didn't. But you get to a point where you do know what you're doing. You know what you've done, and you know what you have, and you're thankful that you weren't completely idle, just resting on your laurels. So that's my spirit of the new year. In other words, in so very many fucking words, I know. But, I mean, shit, if you've seen any of my other videos, you knew what you were getting into. They're half an hour for a reason, so there you go. I'm not always a short-winded guy. Alright, let's cap off our close to 30-minute mark with a New Year's resolution. I put it into terms from one of my friends the other day, and I'll try and remember what I said because it was pretty good. I think I said that my New Year's resolution is to, it was to, something about restfulness? Yeah. Something about, definitely I remember the part about, never being too busy to partake of and engage in my passions and my hobbies. You know, the stuff that I want to do and that I get satisfaction out of doing, because we all get far too fucking little of it. And sometimes it's easy to try and, as a self-defense mechanism, put those things to rest and bury them down. It's understandable when we get too busy for it, but it's almost like there's this part of us. I know that there has been a part of me in the past where when I get a taste of doing something I like, but I can't get enough, I almost don't want any of it because, and of course there's a certain amount of excuse making that goes into that, but it's a guilty sort of a thing. If you're doing some, but you know you're not doing enough or as much as you want to, but you're not willing to stop making excuses and make the proper amount of time, it can be a pretty vicious cycle of self-shame and self-guilt. You almost feel like you're better off not doing it, which realistically is completely asinine, but, well, our brains are pretty fucking asinine sometimes. I guess that would be a part 2 to my call to action for you guys for this video. If you've made it this far in the video, you might as well tell me down below, in addition to your favorite holidays, what is your New Year's resolution going into 2026? And yeah, you guys, I think that with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the video. So thanks again for watching, you guys. Much appreciated. Leave a like, drop a comment, share me to Facebook and shit post me. It's all good stuff as far as I'm concerned. So thanks for watching and have a good one. Merry late Christmas and happy early New Year to you guys. Bye.